Hey YouTubers, and welcome back to another Dragon Ball Super discussion video. Today, as you saw in the title, you saw in the thumbnail, we're going to be talking about the next Dragon Ball Super anime, the next Dragon Ball iteration on screen. And we're not just talking about the movie, but the show. We're also going to be talking a little bit about the manga as well. And joining me with this discussion is the one, the only World King Kanji. I said it right. Okay.
You said it this time.
What's up, Kanji?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. Thanks again for having me on the channel, man. It's always a pleasure to be here. I love this discussion topic. I've got a lot of stuff on my mind to get out about this.
Of course. So, guys, the one thing we have to say, and this is something that Kanji brought to my attention before we started recording, I wasn't aware of this, guys. I didn't know that this was actually a thing, so maybe you don't know this as well. Maybe you're well up, you're caught up, you follow what other people say all the time, and you realize that there is a difference between the Dragon Ball room with Shueisha and Toei, and that they're not just two separate things. I didn't know that. Kanji, do you want to elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, sure thing. So basically, I didn't really know about this until earlier on in the year myself, but it actually turned out a couple years ago. You guys probably remember all these these videos popping up on YouTube, sort of going, "The future of Dragon Ball is safe." That there's been a Dragon Ball room that's been erected, and this was back in 2016. And basically, this was Shueisha's Dragon Ball room. So what we were hearing about at the time was actually the future of what was going to be happening with the manga and what was all going to be happening with Toyotaro's Super manga, the Dragon Ball Heroes Victory Mission stuff, and just now the Dragon Ball Heroes manga, as we've been referring to it as. So it was basically that was what that was for. So that was more for the drawing content. Now for the anime, what happened back in March was news articles started arising because Toei had pretty much announced that they were going to be remodeling some departments to focus more heavily on certain anime. And one of those, which of course was announced, was Dragon Ball. And the Dragon Ball anime that was going to be we didn't know, we knew at the time that Dragon Ball Super had just ended, so we didn't really know what was going to be coming in the future, but we did know that something was going to be happening particularly. And so this is where things kind of just needed to get cleared up before we were beginning to talk, because I didn't want people thinking, yeah, but they've been working on stuff since 2016, when they've actually only just opened this back in April. So,
yeah.
It's just worth clearing that up first.
Yeah, but even regardless of that fact, I think that there's a lot of legitimacy into what we're going to be talking about here today. Obviously, the getting rid of Dragon Ball Super, allowing it to take somewhat of a break as they work on the Dragon Ball Super movie, and the anime just kind of goes off the air. Whether it's completely done or they're going to bring it back is still just rumors and speculation at this point. I mean, obviously, this whole franchise is so big that they're going to bring it back at some point. They're going to never give up on Dragon Ball, and I don't care what anyone says. It's a juggernaut. It's great. So
actually, just expanding on that, to be honest, though, just to go a little bit more into the branding of it all, due to the fact that Super was so successful and was so popular, you'll notice that the new Dragon Ball movie is actually being billed as the Dragon Ball Super movie. Now, this is being done specifically because it's been so popular, so it's getting promotion of. Because as you'll remember, before all of this, it was always just Dragon Ball Z. Everything was going Dragon Ball Z. Like, even the games were Dragon Ball Z, such and such and such. It wasn't Dragon Ball. So it wasn't even if the content actually contained GT and the original Dragon Ball, it was always promoted as being Dragon Ball Z until a couple of instances with not Dokkan Battle, Raging Blast, and a couple of games like that where they actually dropped the title of it completely. For the actual movie being billed as a Dragon Ball Super movie really does show confidence in the name and the brand, and the fact that they're actually wanting to continue it being known as Dragon Ball Super. So when the next hypothetical series starts, I think it's still going to be called Dragon Ball Super. I just think it's going to be Dragon Ball Super with a subtitle or something, like a secondary name.
Mm-hmm. And the one thing that with this whole movie, the plot, bringing back Broly, kind of reaffirming what the Saiyans are and delving into their heritage in this film, I would imagine that, as I've discussed before, and I want your thoughts on this because I'm sure my subscribers have already checked out that video. If you haven't, it'll be in the description section below, along with Kanji's link, so make sure to go check him out. But I really think that they're using this movie as a narrative tool to reset Dragon Ball. And a lot of people think, okay, well, obviously Goku and Vegeta at this point are about as strong as Beerus, or stronger than Beerus, and everything that went on in the Tournament of Power really kind of, although it was a spectacle and something that made us excited for every single week, the whole series was a bit of a mess when it came to power levels, the fights, just the basic non-tension. They didn't really know what they were doing from one week to another. Multiple people were writing stuff. There's a lot of inconsistencies. Heck, we were trying to do a different video before this, trying to figure out what was going on and how strong various gods of destruction were. And one fight that really could have happened in Dragon Ball, they could have manipulated the plot to have this work, but the problem is like, okay, how do we prove this? We have to go to the anime to actually tell us, like, how strong is Beerus in comparison to other gods, and is Beerus known to have fought or knew about Jiren, even though that makes no sense based on what they gave us. There is conflicting lines there that make it seem like, oh, maybe he knew about Jiren, or someone knew about Jiren but didn't, and did they ever meet before? There's a lot of inconsistencies when it comes to Dragon Ball Super, and I really think one of the things they're trying to do with this movie is reset the power structure. Have Goku and Vegeta be the top guys again, at least to everybody that they know. Beerus is kind of more of an afterthought. Whis can't get involved, and whenever they bring back the new series, this movie is going to serve as the placement where Goku and Vegeta at the top of their game, at least in their environment, and the people that they're going to be introducing actually are going to be stronger than them and for legitimate reasons. So Broly's going to do that. What are your thoughts on Broly resetting the power level structure in Dragon Ball?
Well, it makes a lot of sense, generally speaking, because they're bringing somebody in who, as far as we know, does not have God Ki, and therefore it's kind of trying to ground everybody's power levels to try and show that whether you have God Ki or not, you can still actually have a fair fight, which is what they similarly did with Jiren, because I think they tried to hammer in the point that he didn't have God Ki, but he was strong enough to contest with them. So they have been trying to do that in the Tournament of Power, and bringing Broly into it, although we don't know the entire story, we do kind of get the idea that he's not going to have God Ki, because it doesn't appear that the gods particularly know about him. And so you would get the impression that they're just trying to ground everyone's power levels, try and get everybody to a sort of leveling point and sort of go, okay, this is how strong everybody is. This is the new cast of Dragon Ball. So we've done away with Ten Shenhan and Yamcha and all these people that were there at the end of Dragon Ball and the beginning of Dragon Ball Z. We have completely got a new team of people that we rely on. And I think that was what Dragon Ball Super is trying to do. I think that's what the new movie's trying to do. It's restructuring. Because now we've got this kind of direction that they can go forward with from Dragon Ball Super, where they'd been discussing the different universes and stuff. So we have the universe side of everything, but we also have the unexplored universes that weren't in the Tournament of Power. Never mind the fact we haven't even explored any of the other universes. We've seen the odd clip from the odd universe, like we've seen one planet, one town, one city on each one, and we're being told that that's enough, but it's not. So we know that there's so much they can do with it.
There's a lot of things they can do with time travel, gods, other universes. There's just too much, really, that they haven't really explored. And that I completely agree with you, though, when it comes to these characters, when it comes to resetting power levels and kind of reaffirming who the cast is going to be. Whether people like it or not, it really looks like the future of Dragon Ball is going to be in Beerus, Goku, Vegeta, and maybe possibly Frieza.
And maybe possibly Broly.
Yeah, and maybe possibly Broly, as you've discussed before, but these are the people we're going to be focusing on. All these other characters are going to be pushed aside, at least for the majority of the fights or any other thing they put out there, and we're going to push on from here. Every new antagonist, god or not, is going to come up against these people, and they're going to have to overcome this person,
Yeah, and I think there's grounds to have Future Trunks return as well, because I think the entire reason he hasn't stuck around in the main timeline is because they've got something to do with him in future. That's just a feeling I have. I do really feel like they'd have just kind of like, I don't know whether Toriyama thought, well, he's not there at the end of the tournament. At the end of Dragon Ball Z, so that means he's not around at all. But that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. He could just not have been there.
He could have been doing his own thing.
Yeah, or he could have been in the Time Patrol.
Exactly, they could do that as well. So, no. But with that being said, though, with Broly coming in, resetting the entire system of Dragon Ball Super, them taking this hiatus and building their own Dragon Ball room for Toei and the future of Dragon Ball, to me, what it's telling the most telling thing is they are trying to figure out the next arc or 2 or 3 that they can jump off of and they could be way more connected. I understand, and a lot of people have made this a big point over the years, that the Japanese culture doesn't really care so much about the way stories are connected and the continuity of various different iterations of Dragon Ball. They don't care about the quote-unquote canon. But it feels really weird to me in this day and age, with the golden age of television back, or silver age, whatever you want to call it, but the birth of the serialized television show because of the technology, because we're able to watch Dragon Ball Super as it airs along with like the entire world and everything like that. And it feels so disjointed. It doesn't feel like it's overly connected or well thought out, or they didn't know where they were going from one arc to another. When you go back and look at the heyday of Dragon Ball Z, even back in the day when it was reruns on Toonami or they were releasing it in the Dragon Ball dub, you're like, okay, this is connected. This is more connected than anything else on television, especially for a young person in that like mid-90s, mid-late 90s, early 2000s, considering all the other sitcoms or other shows that were out there outside of what, maybe HBO, but even HBO's content was still episodic at the time. So to me, I think that it makes a lot of sense that they could be focusing on where do we go with the story, how do we reset everything, and let's figure out the next couple of arcs so we're not struggling. Dragon Ball Super started with a huge struggle in order to get the next thing out. They were always under a time restraint in terms of getting scripts out, getting the episodes out, and not really paying attention to what every single creative person was doing. So there was there was so much inconsistency.
Yeah, because I completely agree with you there, because one of the things that I wanted to actually touch up upon just before we actually moved on from the Broly subject was the fact that whilst we must be wondering what they've been doing in this Dragon Ball room since April. Now, a lot of you actually may be thinking, well, isn't it obvious? We've got the Broly movie coming out soon. Well, whilst that's true, Toriyama has actually been working on the script for the Broly movie since May last year. So the Dragon Ball room has actually had very little to do with the discussion of what they were going to do in the movie, because Toriyama had already been working on the script of it. That doesn't mean it was finished, but it does mean that it's been being worked on. And since considering the fact that was almost an entire year of Toriyama working on a script, you would actually kind of hope, especially with the lack of depth that a lot of his scripts have had, you would hope that was enough time to establish somewhat of the beginning of the story. And so with that being said, you can assume that most of the stuff that's been going on in the Dragon Ball room hasn't actually been related to this. But what I do think that is, because Toei have been trying to get Toriyama to work with something out with Broly for the last few years. They've constantly sent scripts to him. There was an interview that came out a couple of years ago, and I apologize, I can't remember the source of it at the moment, just off the top of my head. Let's say a couple of years ago, I think it was earlier this year, when we were discussing about where it came out with the characters, where Kale and Caulifla came from. We're asking who designed them, etc. And basically, Toriyama went on to talk about the fact that Toei had been trying to get them to do something with Broly for a really long time. And he kept denying ideas that they were sending towards him, etc. He kept like sort of fluffing it off and sending it back, going, no, it doesn't matter. And then eventually when they asked him to make Kale something like Broly, he decided he was going to do that, and then basically that was Toei's idea, to have a female Broly, as it were, and then Toriyama decided to make Caulifla to go along with her. With that being said, it really does feel like Toei have been trying to get Broly back into it. So whether Toei have had something that they wanted to do specifically with Broly going forward, I do not know, but we all know that Broly's a cash cow for Toei. They love him. He's been a large source of their income for all sorts of things to do with Dragon Ball. But I would like to point out that could be something that's led on to this. So after Toriyama had agreed to begin working on the script, they've ended up sort of going, right, well, we've got that. Then they were able to sort of plan maybe what they wanted to do going forward, which is one of the reasons why I think Broly may end up actually joining the main cast or being a main recurring villain through it. They've had since April to start working on what they were going to do going forward in storylines. Toriyama had also said at the end of everything with Toyotaro that the manga was going to continue in a very different direction with the Tournament of Power and afterwards, to where Toei were going to be going if they ever did anything in the future, because it was uncertain. That suggests that Toei Animation have got a completely different direction that they might want to go with than what Toyotaro does. What are your thoughts on that?
I think so too. I mean, just the idea that there are two Dragon Ball rooms for two different companies and they could potentially divert two different stories in two completely different directions. Maybe one with Broly with the main cast, maybe one without Broly, and we can just kind of explore Dragon Ball in various different ways. That's an incredibly exciting prospect as a fan.
Yeah.
The one thing I like to think about is, if this is what they're doing, I love the concept. I love the idea, you can have Toriyama there, as they've talked about with the Broly movie. Yes, they've had him write it. Yes, they've been checking his script and figuring out, asking him, is like, okay, is this okay? He gives the green light on this or that. But I like the idea of the Dragon Ball room and them taking months or a year to really kind of come up with where we're going next and how we want to explore this franchise that is such a massive cash cow for us that we can't give up just yet. But exploring it in such a way where they're writing these scripts and they're writing this story down with Toriyama's input or not by committee. And I know a lot of people hate the concept of, writing by committee, we need Toriyama, we need one singular vision. That hasn't worked for Dragon Ball for a long time. I think it makes a lot of sense with how big everything here is, that they need to look at it with a ton of different people and figure out what the best step is and how to tell one story that connects to the next, and figure out the best possible direction with a bunch of different creative minds coming together for the best of the fandom. To me, that's exciting. That's more exciting than Toriyama coming back and being like, I am going to helm a Dragon Ball series. At this point, he's kind of past his prime, and I want to see what an entire group of people who's been working on this stuff nonstop every single day for a year can put out there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I agree, because one of the things that you were talking about earlier is wanting them to avoid getting the mess that they got into at the beginning of Dragon Ball Super. If they do this for themselves, they're less likely to run into plot holes in stories. So the longer that they work on this and they kind of iron out the kinks, the more exciting it's going to be for us fans. The thing is, of course, is we know that Toriyama had said that the manga was going to go off in a different direction, but it's also worth pointing out that most of the universes that were not involved in the Tournament of Power were the universes that had the Gods of Destruction designed by Toyotaro. And so those were mostly the ones that weren't used, like, the fish scaly looking guy, and then you had the little black ball of fur and all this kind of stuff. I can't remember the names specifically. And then you've got like the Fox universe, the Fox's God of Destruction universe and all this kind of stuff. Most of the universes that were exempt were actually Toyotaro's universes, and that suggests that maybe that's the direction the manga is going to go forward in, where they're going to go into all that kind of stuff. Maybe Toei are actually going to do different things, or perhaps what Toyotaro wanted to do with the story direction with his characters were different from what Toei wanted to do with those characters or with the other universes, etc. So with that being said, perhaps they've had like an agreement to go in different directions, and that's why they want to do the two different rooms, etc. They're not just going to go completely off of what Toyotaro has been writing, and vice versa, of course. So that really does suggest that we've got a lot going on in the future for the universe sort of storylines, regardless of which one you're going to keep up with, whether it be the anime, the manga, or both,
I completely agree. That's what you were saying earlier. I like the idea of them exploring these other universes that were underutilized in all of Dragon Ball Super. I like the idea of them bringing back various things that you've talked about on your channel where, time travel is still out there, Trunks is still out there and kind of in the void in such a way that they could potentially bring him back in the future. And the fact that they brought back Frieza doesn't seem like it was that was just kind of, we'll just do this because fans want this. That felt like it was setting up something. Frieza's involvement with this movie feels like it's setting up something. The Jiren and Topo and the Pride Troopers, everything in Universe 11 feels like it's setting up something. And the fact that we still have Kaba and Vegeta talking about going to Planet Sadala feels like it's setting up something. I mean, there's so much that they can work on, and hopefully, with a group of people figuring out what the next thing to do is, they can figure out the next story, and that will lead into the next story. People like to hark on the Dragon Ball GT a lot. People love Dragon Ball, and I think that those two series actually make quite an interesting comparison to one another, where you have these stories that are so related and tied to one another. Dragon Ball GT's, all of that story is completely tied to itself. One event leads directly into another, and it feels like a self-contained story, from the wish on the Black Star Dragon Balls looking for them into Baby, which leads kind of in the same way leads to 17 coming back and all that stuff, but definitely that leads into the birth of the Shadow Dragons and all that stuff. And then Dragon Ball has the exact same thing from the 22nd tournament through Piccolo Daimao into the 23rd tournament. This is what we need from Dragon Ball, and I hope with everything they have to work with and as much thought or energy or money they want to throw at the problem right now, they could figure out a great story that takes all of these fan favorite characters, be it bringing Jiren or Toppo back, making Broly a mainstay character at some point in the future, or just having Goku and Vegeta figure out a reason to fight with Frieza, or bringing back Trunks to tie in a lot of these loose ends from Dragon Ball Super and make all the mythology that was put in that series meaningful and interesting going forward, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, finally, the last point I kind of want to bring up with this before we sort of close this out is the fact that now we know when the Dragon Ball, or at least the Toei's Dragon Ball room was erected. So the fact that that was back in April. As I had to double check with you because it doesn't seem like it was as long ago as it is. We know that Super ended back in March, which suggests that when they were actually writing the little sort of outro for Dragon Ball Super, when it was sort of like, but for now, a brief parting and all this kind of thing, that really does suggest that that was there on purpose, because they were actually in the midst of discussing the future of Dragon Ball and possibly even had so many ideas that it was worth creating the new department simply to talk about the future of Dragon Ball, regardless of the movie that was coming out, even if that's what it was in referral to. But this is where the direction is going forward. They obviously know that they're going to do new Dragon Ball content in form of animation, and this is, well, regardless of Dragon Ball Heroes, because that was something else that obviously is coming out of Toei Animation, but it's not going to take all this time to do that because they only pump out one episode every 3 months. So
yeah, 1 8-minute episode, right?
Yeah, that's enough work for Toei Animation. They get there, they put the pen down, they're just like, whew, now 3-month break. There's a tough 8 minutes of screen time.
Yeah, no, and to me, I think that this is an exciting time to be a Dragon Ball fan. I mean, I after all of this stuff, with every announcement they've been making, I guess it's possible that they're going to decide to just do it in movie format. Maybe that's okay. And that's fine, but I think it makes much more profitable. I think it makes much more sense, and it would be far more profitable for them to just put up another anime, explore these concepts, explore the story that they could be building right now, and give the fans what they want from a week-to-week basis. Or heck, it doesn't have to be week-to-week. It could be bi-monthly. It could be also, like, as much as I would hate it, but it would put a lot more time into it, revert Dragon Ball to the season format where you have like the 10, 12, 20 episode seasons like other animes like My Hero Academia or something like that, and give us one story at a time, but connect them in such a way where this really does feel like a revitalization of Dragon Ball. This feels like, something completely different that's connected to what was given to us in the past, and something we can be incredibly excited about in the future.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it's, if Toei are going to do this, and it gives them grounds to do what they want with filler, so we're more likely to get the extended training montages and all this kind of things, the periods where they're actually in like hyperbolic time chambers and stuff like this, where we actually get a few episodes out of it rather than it being done in 2 minutes. It makes a lot more sense to be able to put some filler into Dragon Ball, because as much as I usually dislike it, Dragon Ball is something that does actually do well with these kind of things, where they actually drag certain things out, etc. It's just, it gives them room to do what they want. If they think, right, well, we've got this to work on, let's explore this because we know this is going to be relevant in the future because we've already decided that this is what's going to happen. It's a lot easier for them to work on it than it is to wait for bullet points from Toriyama to come through, and they can kind of go, oh, see, we shouldn't have expanded on that, but we should have expanded on this. When they're in control of doing what they want to do, the content is much better. As we were talking about with GT, the death of GT came from the Black Star Dragon Balls arc being too long and putting Goku back to being a kid and stuff. It was just a couple of stupid creative decisions that affected the rest of the way that GT played out. And typically, the rest of GT actually had some really interesting storylines, but they messed it up so much with the beginning that they ran out of time to be able to explore these things, and they ended up having to rush certain things. And I imagine that Vegeta probably wouldn't have had to rely on being helped by Bulma to get his power up and stuff if they weren't cut down to trying to do it within so many episodes. So I think the future of Dragon Ball is looking really strong. I think it's looking good, and I can't wait for the next series and to find out exactly what they have been doing in these Dragon Ball rooms.
I know. I completely agree with you. In fact, I'm going to be really mad if it turns out that they did a whole bunch of nothing in such a long amount of time, and the fact that they put together...
The Dragon Ball room was for heroes.
Oh, yeah, that's going to be really, really frustrating. But anyway, guys, we're going to leave it there. I hope everyone has had a fantastic time listening to this. I know it was a fun conversation for me. Like I said before, please make sure to go down to the description section below and hit that link to go subscribe to Kanji. The guy makes some real fun content. Very talented, artistic individual, so make sure to go check him out. At the same time, I hope everyone, if you found this video and you don't know really much about my channel, this is basically what we do here. I mean, sometimes we pitch new and interesting concepts. Sometimes we just have fun discussions about Dragon Ball. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that bell over by the subscriber button to notify you every single time I upload, because we try to come up with stuff and get stuff out to you as much as possible. But I hope everyone is having a fantastic day. It's been real.
Bye.